Today I will be talking about the movie In a Violent Nature, directed by Chris Nash. So we begin with a group of friends exploring a decrepit lookout fire tower. The friends can be heard off screen, having a conversation. The group decides to leave as the two other friends begin to feel spooked out. An ignorant soul, named Troy, decides to pocket a locket he finds hanging from the remains of the old lookout fire tower, ignorantly assuming his actions won't have consequences. As they drive off, Johnny peels himself from his shallow grave, only to walk aimlessly for what seems like 10 minutes until the noise of two gentlemen catches attention, a park ranger and a trapper. They argue about the placement of his wild game traps. The ranger, fearful of an unexpected hiker stepping on one. As the ranger leaves in a fit of annoyance, the trapper doesn't notice Johnny blatantly entering his home. Johnny becomes distracted by a gold locket hanging and believes it to be his gold locket, when a flashback of Johnny's father appears in the mirror behind Johnny, only for the scene to be interrupted with the firing of a firearm. As the trapper believes Johnny to be the ranger, only for a new fear to be unlocked as the man has gone from the hunter to hunted as he runs from Johnny, falling prey to one of his bear traps, crawling, before turning back in a moment of sheer panic. The trapper realizes his fate as Johnny relentlessly approaches him, Johnny placing his thumbs on the man's eyes before applying a severe amount of pressure. After Johnny has dispatched of the trapper, a car in the distance can be heard. Johnny decides to pursue. Johnny approaches as the sound of a group of friends pollute the night air with drunken banter while surrounding a campfire. As all groups who sit around a campfire, they decide a scary story must be told. A member of the group named Aaron decides to regale the group with the tale of Johnny's death. Decades prior, there was a young boy named Johnny who just wanted to play with his toys. When those plans go awry as Johnny's father, a merchant, plans to sell products to the loggers at a much higher price. The loggers, growing frustrated, would take it out on Johnny, until one night a logger in a drunken stupor steps on one of Johnny's toy cars and breaks his ankle. That's when it's decided. To get back at Johnny's father, they trick a young Johnny into climbing a tower with promises of a bag of toys. Filled with excitement, Johnny climbs the tower only to be suddenly startled by a logger in a fireman's mask. Johnny falls, causing him to break his neck. That's when the loggers decide to place the fireman's mask on a young Johnny and set up the scene as an accident. Johnny's father refuses to believe it was an accident. After confronting the loggers, Johnny's father is killed with a man responsible claiming self-defense. The logging company chooses what is the truth and covers up the despicable acts. A week later, that's when executives discovered the brutally mutilated bodies of the loggers, with the cause of deaths being ruled as food poisoning that allowed wild animal to feed on the corpses of the loggers. As everyone decides to gather back in the cabin, Troy pulls the locket from his pocket, assuming he has taken Johnny's mother's locket. Aaron attempts to sneak out of the back when he is accused of sneaking out to meet with some gas station girls they encountered earlier. Aaron rejects these accusations, disclaiming he plans to go and take a shit. Johnny stalks the group, observing the cabin as he notices Aaron outside. Aaron standing in front of a tree, enjoying the night in the woods when his night takes a turn for the worst when Johnny decides Aaron no longer needs the top of his head, as Johnny traps Aaron from behind, decapitating Aaron with a draw knife. As if Aaron couldn't have a worse time, Johnny decides to drag his lifeless corpse to the park ranger office. Inside, Johnny collects a pair of dragging hooks, an axe, and equips the antique fireman's mask that caused his traumatic end. As Johnny is now fully assembled, he proceeds to walk and walk and walk until it has become daytime. Johnny approaches a lake, spotting Aurora and Brody being playful on a lake dock. Aurora and Brody share flirtatious banter before Aurora shuts down Brody, deciding to go and practice yoga instead of swimming with Brody. As Brody plans to have a relaxing swim, she is submerged by Johnny, drowning her. With Johnny emerging from the lake with Aurora now in sight, Johnny pursues her uphill, with Aurora mistaking it for an advance from Brody. Before Johnny introduces Aurora to a new yoga pose called Look What You Had for Breakfast, mutilating Aurora with dragging hooks, before booting her eviscerated body down a hill covered in rock and rubble. As Johnny begins to walk, yet again, Johnny hears voices in the distance. Troy, Colt, and Eva are arguing about their missing friends as they begin to panic. Colt throwing the car keys before leaving with Eva on an ATV. Johnny inspects further when suddenly the car keys land at his feet with a toy car keychain attached. The toy car consumes Johnny's attention, distracting him from his path of bloodlust and revenge. In a moment of softness, Johnny sits at the base of a tree and takes his mask off to expose a horribly mutilated face only a mother could love. Johnny becoming enthralled with the toy car. Troy and Evan begin to argue, with one of them mentioning the word father, causing Johnny to snap out of his trance. Filling with rage all over again, he begins a relentless pursuit toward Troy and Evan. With an axe as his choice of weapon, Johnny decides there is never a bad time for target practice as he lodges his axe into Troy's leg when Evan fires a rifle in Johnny's direction, causing Johnny to pause his actions before becoming focused on Evan. Evan fires another round into Johnny's chest, putting him down. Evan impressively is able to focus on getting a tourniquet around Troy's leg. Although Evan's actions deserve respect and praise, he made the grim mistake of not running away when he had the chance, as being a hero will cost him his life. Johnny raises from the ground and launches his axe into Evan's head. As Johnny soullessly walks past Evan's motionless body, he sets his sight on Troy. Troy is screaming for any hope of survival. At this moment, Johnny decides to broaden the way he distributes pain, dumping off his dragging hooks. Johnny spots a large rock and lifts the large rock above his head before making homemade pasta sauce with Troy's head. Johnny pulls a locket from Troy's pocket when Colt and Chris return, shouting about how they found Aaron dead at the ranger station, drawing Johnny's attention. As Johnny re-equips his weaponry, he throws his axe, narrowly missing Chris, before escaping with Colt on the aforementioned ATV. As we endure another scene of Johnny traipsing through another field, literally walking until day becomes night. Johnny approaches the ranger station to hear the park ranger explain the error of their ways, and they are the cause of Johnny's awakening, with Chris wearing Johnny's mother's locket. Johnny is met by Colt, Chris, and the park ranger who had stopped Johnny 10 years prior. Johnny, with a bloodlust, ignorantly walks toward the ranger before being gunned down again, this time with a shotgun. Johnny springs to life, getting his hands on the ranger. Johnny paralyzes the ranger as Colt and Chris flee. Johnny, with evil intentions, fires up a log splitter, while the ranger lays fearful and motionless. Johnny torments him by dismembering one of his arms before testing the strength of the splitter on the ranger's neck. After the ranger has been dispatched, Johnny continues his pursuit of Colt and Chris with hopes of getting his necklace back. Johnny begins his hunt and heads into the woods. Colt and Chris attempt to hatch a plan to stop Johnny and put him down once and for all, only to be exposed by the tremendously effective sound design. After realizing they have been spotted, they spring their plan into action, only to fail miserably. Johnny makes quick work of Colt, as he opens Colt's mind to a different way of thinking. Colt now lifeless, Johnny continues to butcher his remains. Chris watches expressionless before placing the locket onto a gas canister they plan to use against Johnny. Chris sprints off into the woods. As Johnny planned to pursue her, he notices the locket. Johnny grabs the locket and begins to walk, yet again, back to his resting place, as he accomplished his goal of getting his locket back. Chris runs through the woods in hopes of escaping Johnny, unaware her actions have saved her life. As Johnny crawls into the hole from which he came, Chris comes across a truck with a woman inside. After Chris climbs into the vehicle, the lady asked what could have possibly happened to her. Chris replies, attacked by an animal. Cut to credits. If only that was actual ending. The actual ending sees Chris running through the woods before injuring her leg, causing her to bleed. As she runs all night until day, she comes across a road that leads to another road, where she encounters a lady in a truck who proceeds to help her. Driving down the road, the lady proceeds to tell a 12-minute story about a guy named Bobby being attacked by a bear, with having said the name Bobby after every other word. The film continues as it sets the viewer up to expect Johnny, with Chris staring into the forest. Although she left the locket where Johnny was, in hopes he would find it, to only expect him to show up. Strange. That's when we are presented with the same gas canister, only this time the locket is missing. Then.
So first off, I was excited for this movie. I thought it had plenty of potential. And I'll be honest, sometimes my expectations may be too unrealistic, and maybe this is one of those times. Excuse me. As unfortunately, I can only give this movie a 2.5 out of 5 monkey paws. It's not necessarily a bad movie. The biggest flaw is the runtime to substance ratio and the retread of a path already worn. In A Violent Nature, it's pure spectacle with a lack of guts. Um, but that's for the quick review. Now let's get into the good, the bad, and the whatever else. Alright, so the good, the cinematography. It's a beautiful looking film. It only had a budget of $3 million, but it looks like a film that belongs in theaters. So it does look beautiful, and it does have effective camera angles that helps with like visual exposition, and at times it complements the tension and helps enable the suspense. So there's that. And I'm going to start with the good first because it may seem like I'm being a little too harsh on this, but we'll get back to it. So the practical effects, like I said, on a budget of $3 million, the practical effects in this movie are outstanding. It's one of the saving graces of this movie, and it's more realistic and believable than similar films such as like Terrifier, where it's just over the top, gory nonsense for no reason. Don't get me wrong, the first one, it's a gore fest that I love. The second one was just a little too over the top, but it takes itself serious. In Violent Nature, it takes itself serious yet has moments of tremendous gore, without being too campy, except for Colt's death. But and then the sound design. The sound design is haunting and hypnotic. It's probably the only perfect thing about In a Violent Nature, especially when Johnny starts up the log splitter. That made the scene far more effective, in my opinion. And of course, the Ranger, his facial expressions, and just that look of dread and despair. And he already knows what's about to happen. But as soon as he kicks on that log splitter, it can work as like a jump scare, but I think it did tremendous with just creating an atmosphere of loneliness, like morbid brutality. Because once that scene, he gets to the gory bits, it's a little unsettling at times, and it's pretty effective. Just because it's not one of those campy, over the top horror movies where you're like, oh, ha ha. It's more like, eesh, this is kind of hard to watch. And then when Chris and Colt were sneaking around attempting to trick Johnny, but end up failing horribly, it was surreal. Because I was watching on a projector, and I felt like I was injected into the movie, increasing the already substantial amount of dread. So that was one of the scenes that really stuck out to me. But the sound design in this film is incredible. You could hear every little branch, every little leaf, every little, twig, every little thing that he walks across or he does. If he swings an axe, if it makes contact with a person, you just hear every little bit. So once that gore and horror and brutality kick off, it only adds to it even further. But now for the bad. So the bad, there's a lot of unnecessary scenes. I mean, maybe not a lot, but at times it just feels like the director doesn't know when to end a scene. Because I'm all for one shots and long takes if they're done well, but they must convey information that dialogue doesn't need to produce. And I feel like this film falls flat with that. Hydration break. Yeah, I feel like this film falls flat in that aspect. And they try to make the walking scenes seem more effective than they really are, when in all actuality they're just used to make the film a feature length, or at least that's how I felt and that's how I took it, was they just extended certain shots to hit over that mark. Because me personally, I would say this film, it would be an amazing short film, 45 minutes to maybe an hour, 30 minutes if you want to get down to the nitty gritty. And then speaking of which, this movie came off as like a fan-made Friday the 13th rather than like an homage. And there are references to other similar horror movies, but overall it's a little too similar to Friday the 13th, where you're not getting anything new, but you're getting something that you're comfortable with and you're used to. But yeah, I would say that was one of the bigger issues. And then The ending, it just goes on for far too long. Like, there's really no need for that whole, what is it, not even, just that lady going on that kick, that story about Bobby, yeah, Bobby got attacked by a bear, and then Bobby, and then every other word is Bobby, and she's trying to, like, relate to the situation, and it's trying to have, like, that meaningful end, but it just, it's pointlessly long, and like Chris, she leaves the locket. I would assume she understood that leaving the locket and giving it back to Johnny, he's gonna take it and go back to rest or whatever. But she just like pointlessly runs all night until daytime, and then on top of that, instead of cutting the movie as soon as she gets to the car, the random woman, like I said, she just goes on that. It's like literally like 10 minutes, like a rant about a dude being attacked by a bear and how he survived and how everything's okay. But if they would have, I mean, it was almost a carbon copy of other movies. They could have just went with the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre ending if they really wanted to, build that dread and make it seem like she's still in danger. But it's like once you get to the end of the movie, it's all a fake out because it was obvious to anyone paying attention that Johnny wasn't going to be chasing her. As soon as she put down the locket, I knew that the movie was, okay, well, he's obviously going to snatch it and go back to where he was resting. But they tried to trick us and fake us out with, like, what's her name? Chris staring off into the forest as if Johnny's going to be coming up. And it leads to nothing. So it's like there's a trend in horror right now where the ending just goes on for far too long. Kind of like how I'm doing right now. It's just going on for far too long. Proving my point. And then another big thing is, like I was saying, the story is lacking. Sometimes it's nice to have a pure gore, horror, dread, and despair type of movie or experience. Something like Hostel. But the thing is about Hostel is the buildup that creates the dread. With vicious villains that increase the almost intolerable environment. So it's like you have these people that you believe would do these terrible acts with in a violent nature. The character is just some brute that's just walking around brutally murdering people until he gets his locket back. So the story, it was just, it wasn't really there for me. And like I was saying, I know everybody loves Johnny, or they're saying that he's going to be a cult classic or whatever, but I feel like he's a color by numbers antagonist. His origin story is too similar to Jason Voorhees, except it's Johnny's dad instead of his mother, like how it's Jason's mother, and instead of drowning, he breaks his neck, but it's at the hands of adults. Well, not at the hands of adults, but, adults being careless. And then, it's just, he lacks any sort of personality, in my personal opinion. Like, Michael and Jason have done the silent type, the walk around and just, and then they stalk their victims and brutally kill them, but that was done so long ago, and they should have had Johnny be more expressive or create some form of charisma that will keep the viewer involved instead of just using him as a vehicle for the carnage of the film. And I may be reading too much into it, but it's just, I don't know. There was really nothing special about him, in my opinion, and the mask was kind of clunky. Like, the brutality of it was awesome, but it was just that old school Jason where, stab, stab, boom, boom, and then it's like slow. I'm not saying like Johnny needs to be like a Freddy Krueger kind of character, but if you're going to copy Jason, at least copy the brutality of, the 2009 Jason, where if you watch Superstore, Jonah, because I forgot the actor's name, but he plays Jonah in Superstore, when Jason runs up on him with that machete and boom, sticks it in his head. Like, that's truly effective because you feel like you're there for the whole experience, and it's not one of those situations where it's like, oh, I could just run off and he's going to be all slow and then I can get away. So it's just kind of a retread. But overall, those are my biggest complaints. I'd say the runtime, it's just unnecessary, and how long some of the walking scenes are. Like, I was watching it with my brother, and he was expecting Mordor to be at the end, Mount Doom. I was just like, yeah, man, I was Like, what the hell, 45 minutes to an hour pushing it. But enough of me rambling. Let me get to the whatever. So, I know it seems like I'm shitting on this movie, but I can completely understand how others can love this movie. And I have no harsh feelings toward it myself. It's just, I feel like it's a been there, done that situation. And I love certain aspects about it, but I don't see myself rewatching it anytime soon. That being said, I wish this movie all the success it deserves, because the sequel was just announced, and I hope the creator can evolve this film in all the right ways. There's still plenty of potential. I mean, I feel like they only scratched the surface with how simple this movie was, and of course, you don't want to blow it all in one go. You know, $3 million budget, and what we got for the price of the budget, I think it's extremely impressive. So it was just a little slow, but with the sequel, I'm hoping that they can evolve it and take it somewhere new, because I forgot how much money this movie made, but I'm pretty sure it did at least double what they paid. But let me know what you guys think down below. To my viewers, I appreciate you. To my subscribers, I love you. And actually, my subscribers, be sure to comment your preferred names down below. I want to make a credit screen for at the end of all my videos and include the first 50 subscribers for life on this channel, just to show appreciation. So that way, from this moment until I stop making videos, you see your name at the end in the credits. So if you think that's pretty cool, just put your name down below. But anyway, have a great day or night or whatever time it is, wherever you are at. And remember, stay spooky.